So, hi, I'm Anjali Ragbir. I run Writers Key, an education consultancy out of New Delhi. We help students with their college application process. And it's been our effort to bring together different voices in the application space to make the application process easier for everyone, especially the students. And today's topic is all about how to handle research. So we have with us a dynamic young organization out of Cambridge called the Cambridge Center for International Research, who are working with very well-known professors at Cambridge and other institutions. And they're sort of, moving towards helping students, mentoring them with the professors. We have with us Dr. Richard Dybowski, who teaches at the University of Cambridge and has been working and mentoring students in the past outside of Cambridge as well. I know one of my students is being mentored by him, and she's absolutely delighted with the amount that she has learned. So I'm going to pass on to Oliver, who's going to talk you through about what today is going to be about and give you a more detailed introduction to Richard and his activities at Cambridge. So over to you, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anjali. So today, what we're really going to just talk about is the value of research and the value of research for high school students in particular in enhancing their academic profile, and also sort of the career opportunities within academia and beyond, more specifically in fields related to artificial intelligence and to computer science. So it's an absolute honor and pleasure to have one of our core faculty members and collaborators, Dr. Richard Dybowski, who is a renowned artificial intelligence scientist, a pioneer in machine learning and its application to chemistry, who is a faculty member at the University of Cambridge, joining us today to talk to you guys a little bit about the value of research and what we do here at CCIR in connecting students to academia. So over to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much indeed. And the opportunity to say something about myself and my passion for research and about the work being done as well with Zach. Firstly, I've been involved with artificial intelligence for well over 20 years. So a lot of young people don't realize that artificial intelligence, or AI, has been around for a long time. And in fact, the name artificial intelligence was born in the mid-1950s, when I think the students were not yet born. So it's been around for a long time. And it's been very much a roller coaster journey to get to where we are right now. My own particular area started out with applying AI to chemistry, but I got more involved with applying AI to medicine. So a large part of my work still is that area as well. And behind that has been my fascination for how can we make best decisions. We've got something in front of us, we have to make a decision. How do we best go about that? And there's a range of different approaches using mathematics, using logic. And as AI developed, I got more drawn into this area, and particularly in terms of medicine. How does a doctor diagnose a patient? How does that person know of all the possible causes of those set of symptoms? How do you work out in a systematic, most accurate way possible to make a correct assessment of that patient? And that led to other areas as well. So that's an ongoing part. And in fact, with COVID-19, I'm doing 2 projects we can talk about a little later on, which are all related very much with the pandemic that we have at the moment. So my own journey within that area still continues. Why I'm doing this, it's very much to do with a long-standing interest in research. Ever since my teens, I've been fascinated. I would open up copies of Scientific American and just fascinated and tried to understand the articles, and got more drawn into this area and decided that's the person I want to be. It looks like great fun to be a scientist. I want to be a scientist. But it's more than that. Being a scientist means you are asking questions, and to know what's worth doing research in. I've always been taken by a particular saying from a well-known scientist called Jacob Bronowski. And what Jacob Bronowski said is, if you ask an impertinent question, you are on the way to a pertinent answer. In other words, what is important is not just the question you ask, but you ask awkward questions. You ask really searching questions. Why is this? When Einstein worked out his theory of relativity, he asked, if I were to jump on a train and a train moved faster and faster towards the speed of light, what would I experience? He created his thought experiments and asking the basic questions of other phenomena that we see around us. Why is that happening? And asking the right, really awkward questions, really nagging questions. Why is it like that? And that's an important part of research. How do we start research? And if a student asks me, how do I go find a research topic? Well, there's different ways of doing it, and I'd be very happy to go into that as well, how we can actually start to do this. But it's about doing research, and once you start, keep going. There's another one, a very good saying from Pavel Pavlov, who said, you only fail when you stop trying in research. Research isn't a nice, simple, single step. People don't get Nobel Prizes because they discover something overnight. They were very dogmatic and decided to keep going no matter what. And Pavel has said, research is a series, you get success by a series of failures, and you have to keep going. And you only fail when you stop. You have to keep going until eventually you get to where you're hopefully going to get to. I shall stop there for the moment, but any further questions on that point?
Yes. So I think I want to kind of go back to that. That was lovely. That was a super introduction to research. And I almost want to jump in and do research myself after hearing you. So my question is, in today's age, where everything is so consumable, so quick, the younger generation wants every instant gratification.
Yes.
And instant answers to everything. Everything is sort of, dictated by people. So quickly you can get the answer off the internet. I mean, I grew up in an age where you went to a library to actually search out a question.
Yes.
But today it's at the tips of your at your fingertips. So my question to you is, how to engage this generation? How do they engage with research, and how can we direct them towards it as well? What would be sort of, your
well, I think
advice?
part of one of the things about the program that I'm doing with the Cambridge Institute is that with Zach and his colleagues, is that it's an opportunity to learn about research. In fact, what I said to you briefly is what I actually talked about in one of my courses. I did a course on data analysis and research, and what is the research methodology. And there's even those sayings were sayings I gave to the students. I showed the slides. This is Jacob Bronowski. This is what he said. This is Peter Medawar. This is what he said. It's doing that. And one of the benefits of the course is it's an opportunity for the students to experience firsthand, albeit a very short piece of research, but nevertheless beginning to understand how that is. And in one sense, although their things are more immediate nowadays to young people than it was when I was a young person, there's more opportunity. They can go on the internet, they can download code like Python, they can have a go, they can explore, they can see how things are happening. Things can effectively, in some sense, work more quickly. In my time, I had to go to my local library to try and find answers, and it was a long, laborious process. Now it's a lot quicker, but in doing that, you find out other things more quickly through a series of hyperlinks and so on. So by doing that, but keeping those basic tenets that I mentioned earlier on, what those famous people said, can guide that person towards that. And to discover new areas of research and new directions to take in their work. So although things are more immediate in one sense, this also opens up more opportunities as well, I think.
Well said. That's lovely. That's a great thought. So in terms of, you said, how can one actually do the research? What would you say would be sort of, the first three steps of getting your hands dirty, kind of really going after something?
Okay.
What would be the sort of, the key steps to focusing towards a particular topic of research?
Okay. Well, if a person has a particular topic already in mind, let's say bioinformatics, genetic data, I would say, I would say to a student even starting a PhD, the first step is you do what's called a literature review. You go out and you find out what's already been written about that. And in particular, there are certain research papers called review papers, which summarize the state of the art or the state of the science. They say what's currently happening right now in an area. And in doing that, not only does it say what's happening, what are people doing, but what still needs to be done. What are the gaps? What are the questions? What are still to be discussed? So by looking at those, and there are some very good introductory level versions of that, then people can say, this is what people still would like to have answered. This is what's still worth looking at. Shall I therefore start to look at that and begin to find some things out? Now, for sure, as you read some of these papers, they're quite technical. You may not understand everything. Doesn't matter. Get a sense of what's going on. And if a person was able to go to one of the conferences, scientific conferences, again, I say to my research students, go along. You may not understand everything that's been said. It doesn't matter. You get a sense of what's happening. What are the real buzz, exciting areas to take place? Talk to the people there and just get a sense of what's coming up on the horizon, perhaps, and that you can be a part of that as well.
Okay, great idea.
If I may,
yeah, sure.
Sorry, I thought maybe I could also jump in here with a question, which is part of research is sort of obtaining knowledge about the relevant field and sort of developing new ideas. But what in terms of, say, the know-how and the practicality of actually doing research, what sorts of skills do you think high school students are able to glean from this experience that perhaps they're able to apply in other areas of their studies or their life or their work?
Okay, yeah, I would certainly, if it shows, can help them to take a systematic approach to things, to solving problems, because a major part of science, a major part of research is problem solving. Of course, different types of areas outside of science, like humanities, things are done rather differently. But it's at its heart, it's about, well, certainly in science, it's about problem solving. If you're not interested in problem solving, I would say don't go into research, because that's what it's about. You have a passion, you have a burning desire to try to find answers to certain things. That's what it's about. And in fact, I can't remember who said it, but there were recently, this week, we had revealed the latest round of Nobel Prize winners. And one of the people was saying is, if you want to do research, you do it because you want to do it. You're not doing it because you're going to make money, or great if you do, but you're doing it because you really want to do that. That's what drives you to do that. But also, to answer Oliver's question, you're also learning in that process, you're learning to be systematic. I mentioned earlier on that you start to do a literature review. That's a sensible way of doing things. In fact, I have a book here by a gentleman called Peter Mayer, Advice to a Young Scientist. And that is, and one chapter is about the good starting point is just to repeat an experiment that somebody else has done. Doesn't matter if you've done it before, at least you starting to get your hands dirty, okay? You're starting to have a go at something. It's like an artist faced with a pure, pristine white canvas, and you're almost afraid of putting any paint on it. Just put something on it, just kind of break that ice, as it were, and just do something. But also by repeating successfully something that somebody else has already done, you get confidence in doing that, and you're beginning to learn a little about the experimental process at the same time. And then you can start to have confidence to move on towards what you want to do. So you're learning about problem solving, you're learning about the basic tenets of research and what it's like, and accepting at times it can be frustrating, but that's how it is. it's part of that process. It's part of that discipline, and also you begin to become a better solver of problems as well. And I could say a lot more about how to do that in different disciplines. Oliver, does that answer some of your questions, perhaps? Okay.
How important is it to have a framework before you start the research?
So to
Do
have a...
to have a framework, do you recommend your students to have a framework or a guideline about how they break up the task?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Otherwise, what happens, it becomes too daunting to
Right.
endeavor to do that.
Right.
And certainly also it's even to do a literature review, I have a particular framework to start that off. I would say start with the most broadest papers at all, just totally very generally about the area. Then you start to home in into a more specific area, and then you take a more specific area within that. So what's sometimes called the funnel model, where you start in a very broad, almost very introductory area, and you start to go in until you start to see the gaps and you say, oh, there's my niche, that's what I'm going to do. And why I'm going to do it is because that's that piece of work in a context of these other things as well. So you're kind of building for yourself that literature type of framework. But again, it comes in a more systematic approach, what's called research methodology as well. Yes, it's kind of learning how to do that as well. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Another question that I have is, at what stage should one get a mentor or attach oneself to someone else? What stage do you think the research would be ready to kind of, have an advisor on board?
I would think if you can advise, I would say as soon as possible. It's another thing also, and again, why a good mentor would say this is, don't be too ambitious at the beginning. A lot of research students will try or the supervisor or mentor may say, this is the topic you should look at. This is the question you should answer. And then look at it and say, that doesn't seem much. Is that all you want me to do? No, this is what I do. So no, I want to do something more than that. And they don't realize that they take too big a bite of the apple and they can't deal with it, because you can take a simple question, but as you start to go more deeply, then other questions open up and other questions. So what started off as a reasonably simple question starts to grow. If you start too large at the beginning, you will be overwhelmed and your confidence will drop and you lose direction. So the need for a mentor is really important, yes.
And I've often heard that it really depends on your mentor as well. A lot of people get frustrated when they don't get the right mentorship. That relationship is almost like marriage. You're marrying your mentor.
Absolutely,
in
yeah.
one sense.
That is crucial. I've heard unfortunate stories where people perhaps didn't get a good research supervisor, and it's crucial that happens. And I think towards that is to as early as possible see how you get on as you with a marriage. I know somebody else who said to me, or said to other students, if you email somebody twice as a potential supervisor and he doesn't come back to you, stop. Just move on to something else.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So yeah. The one more question that I have is that if you're going through the path of research and you've kind of gone quite a long way, but that it's kind of, how do you kind of gauge that it's not really leading anywhere? Or is there no gauge to that? You just keep exploring. I mean, how do you quantify what are the kind of milestones you should set for yourself?
Well, yes, in terms of milestones, I again, in terms of when I have reached the students, I would try to break it up to say, as soon as practical, that they produce some kind of a research paper, even if it's a small paper for, let's say, a conference, it's a starting point where they feel they've got somewhere. So rather than say, I'm going to get something in 2 years' time, I would say, do a series of publications along the way. Firstly, because you then sense that you are making progress.
Right.
And secondly, is the fact that certainly if you're doing a PhD, one of the criteria of a PhD is that you're doing original research. You cannot do research that somebody else has done. And the sad thing is that you could, along your journey of being a doctoral student, if somebody else on the planet ends up already finding the answer that you are trying to find, at which point it doesn't become original anymore. However, you can support that journey by already doing publications along the way that you have done. And if something happens later on, you can then change direction. So you've already got some publications, and then you move in a different direction to continue, albeit in a slightly different journey as well.
Okay. And how long do you think it takes for publication? I mean, a lot of students want their research published.
No.
So there are a lot of peer-reviewed journals as well. I'm not talking about PhD, of course. I'm talking more from a high school point of view. Are there peer-reviewed journals where they can submit their work, and how long does that process take?
Indeed. In fact, I know Zach has been working hard to try to find certain journals which will take on high school. And that's important that take place. In terms of peer review, it's typically you would expect, it depends on the journal, but it would typically go out to, if there's a good editor who's keeping track of any slowness on the peer review process, all going well, I would imagine they should get, if it's a fast journal, you can get it back within 4 weeks, the peer review. Other journals can take much, much longer. But the kind of journal I think that Zach is looking towards, I think one of the important reasons for choosing a journal is it can be done in 1 month. That'll be great. It may be perhaps take 2 months. And typically, unless you're very fortunate, they will come back with requesting certain changes to be made or corrections or clarity be provided. And then you have to answer that, and you go back again to them. And if that, and then the editor is satisfied with that, then hopefully within 2, maybe 3 months, then a paper should be in press. Yeah, I think so, yes.
So may I join in? So we actually, at our organization, we actually partner with a number of publishers who publish peer-reviewed journals that actually takes papers from high school students. So in our own experience, it is usually within a month, but it's largely depend on, well, firstly, I personally reach out to the editors to make sure that they speed things up. So it's usually faster than the normal peer review process. But it's largely depend on how the students work on their paper. Because once you submit, you have to go through a process. The editor, the reviewer is going to give you comments on your papers, usually 1 or 2 another round. So you have to rewrite and do editing again. So the process could take, sometimes more than a month, but it's usually, depend on how the students work on it, how hard the student work on it.
Right, fantastic. And Richard, one more question that I have is, so high school students are in IB, which is the International Baccalaureate Program. They are encouraged to write a research paper, which is their extended essay, and it is marked. And in the A levels, it's the EPQ, which is marked, and it's quite a cornerstone. Now in India, a lot of the boards don't encourage you to do research simply because I don't think they have the wherewithal to do it across the country. So what I would like to know from you is, what sort of length do you think a paper should have, and how deep would you expect a high school student to navigate the paper? Because obviously they cannot reproduce what a PhD student would do.
No, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
I would say, I wouldn't go so much for length. I mean, if you're going to say number of, let's say A4 pages or something like that with 12-point font, I would just think, quite frankly, it doesn't have to be. You can have extraordinarily good papers in 4 pages, maybe 5. I don't want a student to think the more pages, the better. What's important is the quality and the clarity of the narrative of what they're writing and the argument that they are providing as to why they're doing this and how they're going about doing this and why they've reached the conclusions that they've reached and what else needs to be done that they haven't yet done. That's what it falls down to. So if you want a ballpark figure for maybe 5 pages,
Okay.
and just think along those lines. If it needs to be longer, so be it. But don't think I must go for 10 pages. Absolutely not. That's not
Right.
how the paper will be measured by peer review. It's about what's in that paper and how
Okay, that's
thorough
great.
the reasoning is and what's backing up the conclusions being made.
Right. Fantastic. I think that's been super insightful. I know Oliver has to leave right now. So, Oliver, thank you for joining us. It was really nice of you to
Yeah,
join.
it was lovely for you to invite me on, Jolly. And Richard, it was a pleasure to talk to you and super interesting discussion. Unfortunately, I do have to dip, but thank you so much.
Okay, see you again
Thank you.
sometime.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Oliver.
Bye.
And with that, I think I'm going to open it up for questions. So let's see if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, Zach can tell us a little bit about how CCIR works. Richard, would you like to add something sort of
Yes.
like as a takeaway that you want students to go away with?
I would just say, look at the latest ideas. What are people, and let's say the programs talking about the latest developments in science, whether it's to do with genetics, climate change as well. There's in the UK, there's been an announcement, I think it's called the Moonshot Project, of trying to get people with fresh new ideas of how to address what's happening with climate, with pollution, with plastics, and just think about, you know, what's affecting our lives, what will affect generations to come, and how might you perhaps be a part of that process as well.
Right. And before I let you go, I would love to know more about your COVID research, if it's simple enough for us to understand.
Not at all, not at all. One project is to do with what are called epidemiological models, which are being used by various groups and governments to try and predict what's happening with the COVID-19 virus, what's happening, which way will a pandemic go into various countries. Therefore, how should we try and mitigate those outbreaks? What's the best way of handling things? But unfortunately, the current models don't include certain phenomena like what are called super spreaders, people who are more able to transmit the disease than others. So at the moment, you have what's called the R0 or R0 index. Unfortunately, it does not give you the full picture. It does not include super spreading, which is now realized to be a very important part of what we do. And my other project is to try and work out which antiviral therapies will not react adversely with certain types of people as well. Because not everyone can take the vaccine. It will take a long time before a vaccine appears. We need things in the meantime. And so I'm working on that as well. And again, I'm using AI for that too.
Right. Fantastic. Sounds super exciting. And thank you, Richard. I see one question has come in, which is, what is the eligibility for applying for research? The lady wants to know.
Okay, what's the eligibility for applying for research? If you go for a research grant, if that's what the person is asking, what happens when you apply for research funding? You have to put together a proposal. You have to say what it is that you want to do, why you think that research question should be answered, and how you're going to go about it. You have to give a convincing argument, and you have to make certain that you are writing it that is aligned with the themes of the person who is hopefully going to provide the money as well.
May I chime in case if he wants to ask the question on applying for the research program at CCIR with Richard.
Yes.
That's something we are doing right now. So the student actually will have the chance to lecture by and supervise by and work on an independent research project with Richard. We have a course actually starting on the 20th of October, and Richard is leading a course on the AI. We have a number of applications right now. It's going to be a very small group of no more than 5 people. And interested student can ask Anjali for more information, prospectus on that. But our application, you ask students to complete an application form, and the student will need to include their previous experience, standardized testing if they have done, GPA, and also a very short brief introduction about your academic inspirations, and also your background. And we also have scholarship opportunities. So it will be a great chance for a student to work on actual, and it's the easier way to for students to work on an actual independent research project with a guided mentor from a prominent figure like Richard himself.
Yeah.
Fantastic, lovely. She wants to know if one can still apply for the October 20th program, or is it too late?
It is not too late. We do have a rolling application deadline. That means, once we admitted 5 students, we're going to close the deadline. So it's very possible that we'll close the deadline before the start date, which is on the 20th. We are now in the midst of interviewing students, but we are also taking applications. And between us, I can say that it's been quite competitive. We have been receiving applications, but we are not fully admitted right now. So if you're interested, you're welcome to apply. You can get a document from Anjali and also get a application form for her. And it's totally okay if you wanna wait on it for a week, maybe apply next week. That's totally fine.
Lovely. Does the program include both wet lab and dry lab work, or are there any specific requirements as such to apply for the program?
Sorry. So our program starting on the 20th actually have 4 different courses. Richard is leading one on AI. We have another 3 courses. One is leading by a professor at University of Oxford on genetics, the foundation of genetics. Another one is a humanity course taught by a professor at Cambridge. It's called Philosophy of AI. So if you're interested in AI, but you're more of a social science or humanity student, it's a great crossover. We also have a course on the economic history on the Great Britain. So it's more of a historical and economic course for students interested in history and economics. And it's also taught by a lecturer at Cambridge. So for the STEAM courses, I think Richard can talk more about his own. But one thing I do know that, because of the COVID-19 situation, all of our courses right now are conducted via Zoom. But I think Richard's course has been a great example of how he engaged students. So maybe Richard can talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of lab, obviously there's no wet lab because of COVID and so forth. But in terms of my work, I also get them to do the practical work. They will do is to do some coding. They learn to use a package called R, which is one of the leading statistical and machine learning libraries. And so it's not just learning the theory, but I get them to get their hands on doing some R. In fact, we have also demonstrators and teaching assistants who will help them as well. So they get real practice in doing that. And that becomes part of the research paper that they'll then subsequently write as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, when it comes to requirement, if I may add, we are evaluating each applications on a one-on-one basis. So we will take a look at your application form, and all the students will be invited to an interview with either the teaching assistant, it's usually a PhD student at Cambridge, or the professor himself. So, based on evaluating the application form and the interview, we will come to a conclusion on admission. So there's no hard requirement.
Right. And of course, a curiosity and a passion to do the research.
Absolutely. This is something that the students will
circle back to the first point that Richard made. Excellent. I think thank you so much, Richard, for being here. It's been wonderful to know firsthand. You read about it, but when you actually hear it from you, it sort of crystallizes how it should be addressed and what, you know, and I guess everyone can do research at some level if they're
Yeah.
passionate about it,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. Thank you, Zach, for facilitating this. Really appreciate that. And look forward to participating in more sessions with Richard and other professors that you have.
Thank you for
Right.
inviting.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.